Imagine you're the most popular kid in school. One friend wants your notes, the other wants you to be the part of his football team. Someone tells you to be friends with one and not with others. All of a sudden, everyone wants you. Now imagine the school is the world and the student is India. For decades, India has been worried about or being ignored by the world's biggest powers. But today, the story has absolutely flipped. It has taken a U turn. America wants closer defense ties with India. Russia wants to preserve its long withstanding strategic relationship with India. Europe wants trade, Gulf wants investment, and China, despite having the unresolved border disputes, being our biggest trading partner. Everyone wants something, but nobody wants the same India. And that's exactly what we're going to discuss in today's episode. The episode isn't about whether India's foreign policy is good or bad, right or wrong. It's about understanding why it has become so complicated.
Between knowing nothing and knowing everything, there's a zone. That's exactly where we sit. Not experts, just curious about the world. Welcome back to the Buffer Zone. I'm your host Shabazz with my co-host Shivam, who you just heard from, and he's finally back in the hot seat with me. We both will be hosting you today in our ninth episode. Hi Shivam, what's up, man? Kya haal hai? Long time. Good to have you back. So, what's up? What's going on?
Thanks, buddy, for the welcome. And all good now. तुझे तो पता ही है, I've been stuck in the professional and personal stuff a bit. Life just got in the way, but it's great to be back. Great to be back. But before Shabazz, we dive into it, I really, really want to take this chance to, appreciate you what you've been doing. I think you've covered three or four sessions, four episodes by yourself, and truly seeing you as a viewer, seeing you getting more comfortable in front of the camera, it's been pleasure watching you. So it's great to be back.
You made me shy. Thanks a lot. That means a lot. And hopefully, now that you're back, we can take that next step, and hopefully, we keep getting better from here.
Absolutely. Now let's get into today's episode.
Shivam, there's something that I've noticed that I want to talk to you about. Whenever there's a major geopolitical crisis, whether it's the Ukraine-Russia war, whether it's the war in the Middle East, or if there are tensions in the Indo-Pacific, the conversation somehow ends up at the same question. So, what is India going to do? Why? Has India become a superpower all of a sudden? Not exactly. What's really changed is the world around us. After COVID exposed fragile supply chains and competition between US and China intensified, governments and businesses started looking for alternatives. They didn't necessarily want to replace China per se, but they were trying to avoid depending on a single country. That shift opened the door for countries like India. India offers a massive domestic workforce, growing economy, and a strategic location in the Indian Ocean. More importantly, India has also been able to maintain working relationships with countries that often disagree with one another. And as we've learned this in the previous episode, this is a very big plus point for India's foreign policy.
I think being important and being powerful, they are completely two different ideas. Importance, I believe, is how many people need you. But being powerful is how you leverage that position. People often, confuse and blur these ideas. And I believe personally, this to be the biggest mistake in geopolitics. So today, let's answer one question. Why does everyone want India? And can India keep everyone happy?
Absolutely. And to answer that question, Shivam, we have to figure out how India ended up here. If you go back 15, 20 years, India was not the first country that people mentioned when they talked about global geopolitics. Mainly the conversation was dominated by US, China, a little bit of Russia, and Europe. India mattered, but it wasn't at the center of every strategic discussion. So, what changed? For years, the global economy ran on a simple assumption that if you want to manufacture something efficiently and at scale, you go to China. Companies built factories there, a lot of investment was done there, supply chains became deeply interconnected. And world started getting comfortable with the idea that China is that single manufacturing powerhouse that's Messiah that's going to save the world, you know. But then COVID happened and the bubble burst. Everything changed. Factories shut down, ships were delayed, businesses couldn't get the parts that they needed, and governments realized just how fragile the global supply chain really was. You know, during COVID, maybe the medical supply chain or the medical facilities of the world were not the only ones that were exposed all around the world. I think supply chains also suffered, and that reality came to the fore that you cannot depend on just single country. Uh, at the same time, tensions between US and China kept rising. Trade disputes grew bigger, and things were just not as cheap as before. And the countries realized that it was not about making and getting things at a cheap rate. It was also about making sure that if and when the next crisis hits, the system does not collapse. Together, all these developments changed the global conversation. Countries started wondering, what if we had another option? Not instead of China, but alongside it. A way to spread the risk. As they say in stocks, don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? So that's where India entered the conversation. The world changed dramatically, but India also was not standing still either. Global events created new opportunities, but India's own economic and strategic push made it a serious contender. India offered something very few countries could match at this time: a massive consumer market, a young workforce, growing digital economy, and a strategic location connecting the Middle East, Europe, and the Indo Pacific. That meant that when the world was looking for alternatives to China, India was already in the room. But here's the part that's often overlooked: India did not become important because suddenly everyone agreed with it. India became important because different countries started seeing the different value India gave in partnering with India to them. And that's a very different thing. Being needed by everyone does not automatically make you the most powerful person in the room, as you rightly said, Shivam. Sometimes it just means everyone expects something from you. And that brings us to the real story. What people say. When people say the world wants India, they're technically right. They're just leaving out one tiny important detail. Nobody wants India for the same reason.
Beautiful. Beautifully captured, Sabas. So moving forward, then what exactly does everyone want? So let's break it down country by country. So let's start off with the United States. A lot of people assume that for America, India is just a counterweight to China, which is true, part of the bigger picture, but not the entire picture in itself. US also protects India as one of its most important technology partners, one of its growing defense partners, we being the world's biggest consumer market. So a stronger relationship with India isn't just about the headline. It's about how we see the relationship amongst the two countries for coming 20, 30 years over the period of time. And how does the Indo-Pacific scene eventually looks like? But Shabaz, I also want to iterate the fact that here's something more worth remembering. Just because two countries are working together, it doesn't necessarily mean that they agree on everything, right?
Right.
There were two recent examples with United States, the current administration in United States. We do have disagreements over the trade deal. We do have taken different stance on the Russia-Ukraine war, but I believe that's the beauty of it, right? International relationships, they aren't just friendships. They are partnerships which are built around the overlapping interests. And also keeping in mind the present scenario only, whatever chaos one administration brings in. And trust me, the present Washington administration is very creative about it. The underlying architecture to because America was never just a president, right? It was a system in itself. Defense corridors, they don't care about truth social. Then the tech corridors, they don't pause for press conferences, right? The states, the institutions, the industries. We built a relationship with them and they have built relationship with us over decades, silently, quietly, consciously, deliberately. And 4 years of noise, it's not going to undo that. Neither does hate. So the relationship, I believe, it outlasts the temperament of the person who's holding that pen in the White House. So that kind of sums up, the what both the countries want from the US and the India, right? Moving on, one of our key strategic partners, Russia. It's a completely different story in itself. For decades, Russia has been one of India's biggest defense partners. They have stood by us across thin and thin, and over the years, it has also become, amidst all the chaos about Zobium, especially in terms of energy crisis that the world is facing because of Iran, US, Israel war. uh, Russia has been a significant source of discounted oil for us. So these relationships, they don't disappear overnight, and they don't disappear because of the fact that the rest of the world is changing. To most of the observers and the think tanks, especially in West, they have and they might say India as contradictory in our stance and might call us hypocritical too. But we have been very blunt, very straight that our foreign policy is based on our national interest. We need to serve 1.5 billion people first. That's the goal of the governments that are part of the nation. Whether you agree with this approach or not, but it's very clear that we don't make decisions based off emotions, which is very evident in today's world. Many presidencies are doing that, but our approach is completely different. We make decisions which we believe are long term and in our national interest. So, a completely different story of Russia and Russia. Then you can take the other key partner, Europe. So with Europe, the priorities are completely different again. European countries, they see India as an important trading partner. Also, they kind of see us as a, as you rightly mentioned, after COVID, countries and nations started looking for alternatives. So they are seeing India as a manufacturing destination. They are looking for resilient supply chains and who better option than India in that terms. And testament to that would be, as many say, the mother of all deals which have taken place between the European nation and India, the free trade agreement that I'm talking about. So that's a testament to that. And then we have China, our favorite topic to discuss. No relationships about, I think, and I believe, captures the complexity of the modern geopolitics better than China. India and China have unresolved border disputes, unresolved. We compete with each other in many areas, in many fields, and we both want to project ourselves of having a greater influence over the Asian continent. Yet, despite those, tensions and different stances, we continue to trade with China, and China continues to trade with us billions of dollars every year. It might sound contradictory to many, but my friend, that's because geopolitics of it.
The same country can be your biggest competitor and one of your biggest trading partners. Those two things can be true at the same time. And that's exactly what makes foreign policy so difficult. Now, let me ask you something. Which relationship do you think India can actually afford to lose? Take a second and really think about it. The US, Russia, China, Europe. Seriously, pick one. Most of us instinctively want to choose one. But here's the problem. If India distances itself from the US, it risks losing a crucial technology, defense, and investment partner. If it walks away from Russia, it complicates decades of defense cooperation and energy ties. If relationship with China deteriorates even further, the consequences are not limited just to the border. This also affects us because India and China are each other's one of the largest trading partners, and Europe remains one of India's most important export markets. So where do we go, right? So what's the answer?
So, Shabazz, I think the answer maybe to your question is none of them, none of them, none of the countries. And uh, that's exactly why India's foreign policy has become one of the most difficult balancing acts in the world. And because it isn't about choosing friends, right? It's about protecting national interests without shutting the doors and closing the doors for others. So choosing one is, I believe, very tough. But at the same time, I also know that it's much easier than that.
So again, that's the main question, right? It is so complicated. So can India keep balancing everyone? Let's go back to where we started. Imagine you are Foreign Minister of India. You begin your morning with a call from Washington about defense cooperation. Before your afternoon coffee comes in, Moscow wants to discuss energy and military ties. Before your supper, Europe is pushing for a trade agreement. And before you head off to sleep, the Gulf and China come over to talk about their own strategic interests. Now imagine trying to make all those conversations work at the same time. That's the challenge. People often describe India's foreign policy as sitting on the fence. Everyone is entitled to their opinions. I don't think that's the best way to look at it. A better way to think about it is this: India is trying to keep as many options open as possible in a world where everyone is becoming polarized. That's what people mean by strategic autonomy, a term that has been used hundreds of times by Shivam and myself in our previous episodes. Strategic autonomy, which is India's foreign policy, it does not mean agreeing with everyone. And it does not mean avoiding difficult decisions either. It means trying to make each decision based on India's own interests rather than automatically following someone else's agenda. So India does not jump on the bandwagon just to get a few claps. The real question is whether that strategy can survive in the next decade. What happens if tensions between US and China become much worse? Think about the Taiwan crisis. What happens if another major conflict disrupts the global trade? What happens if in future countries choose sides more clearly than they do today? Can India continue balancing multiple relationships, or will the world eventually make that balance impossible? The honest answer is nobody knows. And that's precisely why this story matters. For years, the debate was whether India would become an important global player. Today, that debate is largely over. The more interesting question is that what India chooses to do with that importance. India is already at the table now, but what does India do from here? Can India continue protecting its own interests while navigating a world that's becoming more fragmented each year?
History rarely remembers a country that had most of the options, right? It always remembers the choices that the country makes when all those options start to disappear. So I'll leave you with one final question. If you were responsible for India's foreign policy for the coming 10 years, what would you do? Would you move more closer to US? Would you deepen your already perfect strategic ties that you have, long-standing ties that you have with Russia? Would you deepen your economic partnership with Europe? Would you focus on managing your competition with China? Or would you continue to try to balance them all? I would genuinely love to hear your answer because there isn't any obvious one.
Wow, Shivam, this feels like you never left. You're on fire.
Okay.
If you guys enjoy this episode and you want more conversations that go beyond the headlines, consider subscribing to the Buffer Zone. We don't tell you what to think. We simply try to make sense of a world that's becoming more complicated by the day. Amateurs seek the sun, get eaten. Real power lies in the shadows. This is the Buffer Zone. See you next week.